Have you ever felt like you were being punished not for being wrong, but for being too right? You enter a conversation with clarity, driven by logic and observation. You offer a perspective not to dominate, but to illuminate. Yet, instead of appreciation, what you receive is silence. A shift in the atmosphere. A strange discomfort settles into the room like fog, and suddenly, you're no longer part of the conversation. You've become the problem. It starts subtly. Someone looks away. Another forces a laugh. The topic changes too quickly, and you're left wondering, did I say something offensive? Was I too blunt? But deep inside, you know the answer. What you said wasn't offensive, it was true. It was simply too true, too clear. And clarity, in a world drowning in self-deception and social pleasantries, can feel like an act of aggression. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer knew this well. He once wrote, "To be alone is the fate of all great minds, a fate which no one has yet escaped." In those words, you can feel not only the melancholy of solitude, but the sharp recognition that solitude is often the cost of insight. Because in this world, intelligence is tolerated until it threatens someone's comfort. If you're perceptive, if you see patterns others miss, if you question what everyone else blindly accepts, you've probably noticed this. People start to treat you differently. They may admire you from a distance, but they don't want you too close. They'll compliment your intellect in one breath, and in the next, roll their eyes when you speak. Not because you're arrogant, not because you're wrong, but because your clarity holds up a mirror they're not ready to look into. In these moments, you're not just being misunderstood. You're being resented, because your presence challenges their narratives, and your words demand they think, really think. This isn't just uncomfortable for them. It's terrifying. So what do? They mock your tone. They say you're overthinking. They label you too intense, too serious, or worse, difficult. And you begin to shrink. You doubt yourself. You start rewriting your sentences in your head before you speak. You wonder if silence might be safer. Let's pause here, because this isn't about you being too much. It's about the world being too shallow. And that's why you're here. This video isn't going to tell you to dumb yourself down. It won't ask you to smile more or speak less for the sake of being liked. Instead, it will offer you something deeper. The philosophy of Schopenhauer, the strategy of silence, and the truth about how the world treats the thinking mind. If you've ever asked yourself, why does being right feel so wrong? You're not alone. And what you're experiencing isn't failure. It's awareness. And awareness, my friend, is both a gift and a responsibility. It's a bitter truth, but it needs to be said. Most societies don't reward intelligence. They reward conformity. Sure, they put intelligence on magazine covers and in university brochures. But in real-life social dynamics, classrooms, offices, friendships, what they truly value is harmony, obedience, and agreeableness. And here's the paradox. The smarter you are, the more likely you are to see through the illusion society depends on. The more deeply you think, the more often you question. And questioning, especially in environments built on fragile consensus, is rarely welcomed. Why? Because intelligence is disruptive. It doesn't mean you're trying to cause trouble. It means your presence challenges the unspoken agreements that hold groups together. Social psychologist Leon Festinger called this cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable tension we feel when someone presents us with information that contradicts our existing beliefs. When you speak a difficult truth, people don't just hear new information. They feel their internal world shake. And instead of saying, "That's interesting," their brains whisper, "This person is dangerous," so they defend, not always with hostility. Sometimes it's subtle. A joke at your expense, a polite dismissal, or a look that tells you, "Not now." But beneath the surface, a quiet resistance builds. Groups, whether families, teams, or societies, thrive on similarity. When one person stands out by thinking too independently, speaking too clearly, or refusing to follow the emotional script, they become a threat to the group's stability. So what does the group do? It normalizes mediocrity, praises simplicity. It rewards those who echo the dominant tone and punishes those who dare to ask, why? And over time, you start to see a strange pattern. It's not the smartest people who rise. It's the safest ones, the agreeable, the diplomatic, the ones who know when to play dumb and when to stay quiet. So if you've ever wondered why your honesty makes people uncomfortable, or why speaking up feels like sabotage, you're not imagining it. You're seeing the system for what it is. Because intelligence, in its raw form, doesn't make people love you. It makes them afraid of you, not because you intend harm, but because your clarity strips away their comfort. And in a world that often prefers comfort over truth, that makes you dangerous. So, what do you do when the world punishes your clarity? Do you dim your light? Shrink your thoughts? Apologize for being awake in a room full of dreamers? No, you adapt not by betraying yourself, but by learning the art of strategic silence. There is a difference between suppression and containment. Suppression is fear-based. It's what you do when you believe your truth has no value. But containment, that's strength. That's mastery. It means you know your truth is powerful, too powerful to waste in the wrong room. Lao Tzu, the great Taoist philosopher, once said, "He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know." It's not a call to permanent silence, but a reminder. Discernment is power. Knowing when to speak and when not to is what separates wisdom from ego. In a world that's always shouting, whispering can be revolutionary. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to stop trying to be understood. Why? Because not everyone deserves your energy. Not every room is built for your voice. And not every mind is ready for your depth. There's a moment when a wise person stops forcing alignment with those who live on another frequency. Not out of arrogance, but out of peace. They realize it's not your job to convince, convert, or compete. Your job is to conserve, to channel your insight into spaces that can hold it, to surround yourself with people who don't flinch at your clarity, but welcome it. People who challenge you back, not with insecurity, but with curiosity. But until you find that space, you armor yourself with quiet. You observe more, you speak less. And when you do speak, it lands like thunder because you chose your moment. The greatest warriors of history, strategists like Sun Tzu, didn't fight every battle. They chose the terrain, the time, the conditions. Victory wasn't about fighting hard, but about fighting wise. And so it is with your intelligence. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. You don't owe your brilliance to every conversation. Sometimes the deepest form of power is being underestimated until you no longer are. Let's be honest. There's a moment when someone tests your patience, says something ignorant, dismissive, or just plain wrong, and every cell in your body wants to fire back. But you don't. Not because you're weak, but because you understand something they don't. Not everything deserves a reaction. Emotional control is the superpower most people never develop. In a world that rewards impulsiveness and instant opinions, those who can pause win. They win not because they're passive, but because they see the full chessboard. Every time you react emotionally to provocation, you give away control, not just of the conversation, but of how others perceive your intelligence. Because make no mistake, people aren't just listening to your words. They're reading your face, your tone, your body. They're calculating how centered you are. So what happens when you remain calm, even when provoked? You disarm them. You rise above the bait. You send a message without saying a word. I don't need to prove myself. I know who I am. That's real power. This is the same reason why truly wise people often speak less. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they've mastered the art of choosing what's worth saying and what's not. In fact, some of the most intelligent minds you'll meet won't correct you when you're wrong. They'll observe. They'll reflect. Because they've learned that truth has more power when it's revealed at the right time, not when it's used as a weapon. Think about it. How many arguments have you won, but felt empty afterward? How many times did you prove your point, but lose the connection? That's the cost of ego. That's the price of needing to be right all the time. Smart people aren't driven by that need. They're driven by impact, by understanding, by timing. So if you've ever sat in silence during a heated discussion, not because you had nothing to say, but because you knew your silence spoke louder, you're already ahead of the game. So maybe you've spent your life wondering, why do I always feel out of place? Why does everyone else seem so sure, while I'm still questioning everything? Here's a truth no one tells you. It's not because you're broken. It's not because you're weak. It's because you're more awake than you realize. And in a sleeping world, the awake ones always feel out of sync. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that path is not loud. It's not praised. It's lonely. It's quiet. It's full of moments where you doubt everything, including yourself. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop fighting for external validation, you begin to build an inner foundation. You start to realize you don't need to be understood by the crowd. You need to be understood by yourself. And maybe, just maybe, your silence hasn't been a weakness, but a space where you've been growing. You've been listening, watching, becoming, not passive, not absent, but intentional, like the seed that breaks under the soil before it rises into the sun. You've been preparing. So if you've ever been told you're too quiet, too intense, too deep, take it as a sign. You're not too anything. You're exactly enough. And maybe the reason they don't understand you is because you weren't meant to be understood by the average. You were meant to awaken the rare. So what now? You stop shrinking to fit in. You stop over-explaining your value. You start trusting the energy you bring to the room, even if no one claps. Because the people who are truly meant for you won't need the performance. They'll feel the truth in your presence. They'll meet you where you are, not where you pretend to be. And that's the beginning of real connection. So here's my invitation to you. Leave a comment and share. What's one moment where your silence spoke louder than words? You never know who you'll inspire just by telling the truth.